We are live and on location at the Peacock American Grill and Bar in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. It is another hour of the Legislature Today radio show. Brand new program here Monday through Thursday nights where you can keep tabs on what's happening in the 63rd Assembly of the North Dakota Legislative Session. Your representatives, your senators from all across North Dakota converge on the state capitol for 80 days of legislative work throughout this legislative session, and we are here to keep tabs on what is happening on your behalf and let you interact with your legislators. We do that Monday through Thursday nights. We also do it Saturdays between 10 a.m. and noon. And by the way, Saturdays, first show under our belt last Saturday, and with the busy weather weekend, we had more weather reports than we had legislative reports. But what we're hoping to do is have Saturday's show be a resource for you, so you know when the forums are being held in your communities, and always try and have the legislators on from their districts the week before they'll be meeting with their constituents, so you have a good week's notice on when you can get together with them. Tonight's program is brought to you by the Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We have a full hour of topics on those regards to tackle coming up in the program, so stay tuned for that straight ahead. But first, let's recap what happened today in the legislative session, and the managing editor for Great Plains News, Dale Wetzel, is here. Dale, what happened today?
Well, there was some very limited action in the House and Senate in terms of bills being voted upon. The only one I did a story about was the name of the developmental center in Grafton, which is used to educate North Dakotans who have developmental and intellectual disabilities. The name is being changed to the Life Skills and Transition Center. It's had a number of names over its history, which lasts for more than a century. The Grafton School, which was then called the School for the Feeble-Minded, was opened in 1904. It had a peak population of well over 800 in the 60s, before the deinstitutionalization trend took hold in the nation and in North Dakota. And in North Dakota was essentially pushed along by a federal lawsuit filed by the Association for Retarded Citizens. And anyway, the Grafton School is now known as the Developmental Center. It became the Grafton State School, the Developmental Center, and now it's going to be known as something else if this bill is approved in the House as well.
Is there any reason it wouldn't be approved?
No, not really. The Department of Human Services wants it, and I've never really seen a protracted fight over a agency name, and of course it does conform to the bureaucratic rule that a new name must be longer.
Although, can you imagine a time when we would name an institution the Institute for the Feeble-Minded, or the the Home for Retarded Citizens, or something? Clearly, that's a
Well, the Jamestown Hospital is known as the Insane Asylum. That's our language obviously has changed quite a bit in the last century. Also, I spent most of my time in the House Finance and Taxation Committee. There are a number of property tax bills in that committee. Essentially, there are different strategies being contemplated for reducing the property tax bills that North Dakotans pay. There's the strategy of giving a big chunk of change to school districts and telling them to use it to cut their own property tax rates. There's the strategy of essentially exempting part of the value of a home, a primary North Dakota residence, from property taxation. The bill that got the most attention today would exempt the first $75,000 of a home's market value from property taxation. And if you're at least 65 years old, the first $125,000 would be exempt from property taxation. That's a different approach. And there's going to be other approaches as well. And one of our, a minute ago, we were talking to a couple of other legislators, and one of them referred to these bills as the tip of the iceberg, which I think that's even being generous. It's probably just the very pinpoint of the iceberg. We're going to see a lot of these types of proposals during the session, and it's going to be very interesting watching the legislature sort through all of them.
Explain why there are a lot of legislators running around with blue folders. What's happening in that regard right now?
Well, the House bill, there are two bill introduction deadlines basically in both chambers. One of them, it's an introduction deadline for as many bills as you can put in. There's up until a certain point, you can put in as many bills as you can carry. Then after you hit a certain point, and we've hit this point in the House now, you can only introduce 5 more bills. And in the Senate, there are similar deadlines, only the Senate deadlines are later. And so when the House deadline comes, there's a lot of House members running across to the Senate saying, oh, please introduce my bill. You know, I need somebody to introduce my bill. You're looking around for somebody who hasn't introduced 5 bills. And what you meant by the blue folders is these folders come with blue sheets of paper backing, and they have a very distinctive look. And so people are running around, well, not literally running, but they're walking fast around with handfuls of these blue folders, trying to explain their bills to their colleagues, seeing if they will co-sponsor, and it's quite entertaining.
Very interesting. Well, a little recap as we begin every hour with kind of a run-through on things that you ought to know about that are happening in the legislative session. Get underway with another hour of a discussion. This hour brought to you by the Association of Oil and Gas Counties, and we have some special guests here, including representatives from the Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, Dan Brose, who is the president of the organization, as well as being a city official in Bowman, North Dakota. And as well, we have the Deputy Executive Director of the organization, Brady Pelton, is with us, and someone you've no doubt covered over the years for a long time, one of the legendary members of the legislature, Bob Scarpel, Republican.
And he has covered me.
Is that right? Yeah. I bet he'd love to turn the tables around with a little notepad on you as well. Bob Scarpel, Republican.
No, he doesn't use a notepad.
From Tioga is here as well. So managing editor of Great Plains News is Dale Wetzel, and he begins in our questioning today.
Well, Mr. Brose, you are the Bowman City Engineer, if I recall correctly, sir. And I believe in your hands you have a study from the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, which was done. I mean, this is like the second one, at least, that has been done. Essentially, it tries to give a systematic, scientific, data-driven approach to figuring out which roads in western North Dakota and in North Dakota generally need to be repaired, which ones carry the most traffic, which ones need to be improved, which ones need to be rebuilt, which ones need to be built probably in the first place. And if you could enlighten us as to what the data say, we'd be grateful.
Okay, thank you, Dale. I guess I would just like to start out by saying the association commissioned a study to get some objective views of the cost of roads and building roads, and we did that about 3 years ago, and it was a pretty short time frame when we put that together. They did the Upper Great Plains Institute did a good job with it. One of the things they tried to do was to come up with a method of saying what's the difference between a regular road and an oil impacted road, and they did a pretty good job with that. And we brought that data to the legislature 2 years ago, and I think they took it into consideration. They helped us with some funding, and then we talked about what could be done differently. And I think that's what brings us to the study we have here, and the gentleman that probably championed it the most to not only continue the study but to expand the study, and that's Representative Scarpel. And so I thought it would be appropriate for him to come in tonight and kind of give us his thoughts from a legislator standpoint of why he did it, what he got out of the first one, or what his thoughts are, because he was the person that did it, and I'm assuming maybe we got enough data so we can do it again next time. But that's up to guys like Bob that come up with the money. So
First of all, Bob, could you tell us the area you represent?
Well, I'm from District 2. I live in Tioga, North Dakota. I represent extreme northwest corner of the state, bordered by the Canadian line and the Montana line. And
how much oil development is there going on in your district? How much oil impact is there?
Far more than the natives could have a full appreciation for. It's a pretty hectic area. It really is. It's much like Watford. It's just Williams County. Obviously, Williston's a mess, and hopefully it's getting to be less of a mess. But it's still a difficult place to sometimes deal with on the normal lifestyle basis that we're used to.
Tell us what it's like to live out there with all of this hubbub going on.
It's dramatically changed the lives of the natives. It really has, because of the fact that even the food in the grocery store is different. The ethnic differences between the past and now are incredible. You know.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Well, we have a lot more Hispanics. And because we have more Hispanics, the grocery store caters to some of the things they want. And because of the amount of space available in the grocery store, there can be priorities created. I know my wife said that when she goes in there's times she can't find what she used to buy, but here's all this other stuff that she's not familiar with. And you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because maybe you'll create a better diet for yourself and be less well-rounded than I am.
What's it like? What's the traffic like to deal with?
Never thought I'd have to wait 10 minutes to get through a stop sign in Tioga. I never realized it could take 20 minutes to get to 4 miles from Tioga to Highway 2, but it happens on a regular basis. I've seen it happen where I had to go through 4 traffic signal changes to get through a traffic light at the intersection of Highway 2 and 40. Had to wait for the light to change 4 times because of the number of vehicles sitting waiting.
And what are those vehicles? What are they? I mean, are they oil trucks or
40% of them are semis, or more. I mean, it's just a way of life that trucks are everywhere.
Do they drive nicely?
Some of them do, some of them don't.
I understand there's a lot of out-of-state plates too.
Yes, there are a lot of out-of-state plates. We had a conversation about that earlier today. I'm not sure we want to take time.
No,
we're
not going to get into that right now. But it's there's a lot of out-of-state plates, and maybe a few of the folks don't drive as nicely as they should. But anyway, what about this study, Representative Scarpel? Why did you think it was necessary, and how do you think it should be used to decide road building priorities?
Well, just to kind of lay some groundwork, you know, after the 2009 session when the Association of Oil and Gas Counties decided to fund this study, I was a little uncertain about whether or not it was going to be something that would be useful to us. Part of the reason for my potential cynicism was that I went to college with the guy that was the head of the Upper Grade Transportation Institute, and I remember how much fun we had. but it did at least initially produce a third party that could give us a somewhat more objective opinion about the quality of the roads. And realizing that, you know, in the 2011 session, after having some exposure to this and thinking about what it could potentially do and how it would be good for us as legislators to have a third party objective opinion with some scientific basis tell us what needed to happen. We contracted with them, the legislature contracted with them. I believe the appropriation was $350,000, if I'm not incorrect, to do a more in-depth study. Part of the reason I thought in-depth was necessary was because when the Association of Oil and Gas Counties did it, the Upper Great Plains Transportation relayed to me that they didn't have a lot of time, and that what they did in as short a time frame as they could in order to put the product together to have available for the 2011 session. And, you know, because of that...
Hang on one sec, Bob. We just lost our connection to K-Fire here, so just hang on one second. And don't lose your train of thought there, but... All right, apologize for the short interruption there. Our connection with our link to the station interrupted Representative Scarpel there, so I didn't want to stop Bob. So our listeners would not miss anything in his answer to Dale's question on the funding and the purpose behind the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute study. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Well, I thought it was important that we, you know, get even better information if it was plausible. So I had fairly substantial discussions with Denver Tolliver at the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute about our needs and whether or not they could actually provide us with even better information given an appropriation and more time. And he reassured me that they could, and that they would seek the counsel of the county engineers and the county commissioners throughout North Dakota and get better quality information, more thorough or a broader amount of information. And the study was to encompass not only oil country, but the entire state, so that we had numbers for the entire state of North Dakota. And I thought, you know, from my perspective, you know, a lot of people in western North Dakota like to say, well, we need our roads fixed. Well, you know, the folks in the rest of the state want their roads fixed as well. And while western North Dakota's needs may be the most critical, the balance of the state have road needs that are just as important to them as ours are to us. And I thought it only fair and appropriate that we try to get as good an analysis as we could get of the roads. So we appropriated $350,000 and asked them to do what they could to make, provide us with the best information, and I think they did that. I think they brought us a really good report during this interim, because it's been a work in progress now during this interim. But on discussing that report with some of my commissioners back home, it was brought to my attention that even though they did more substantial work than they did in the original study, it still wasn't up to the level that they thought it should be. And the reason I say that is that they felt there were roads in the report that was being suggested that they could be just upgraded, and the county commissioner said these roads are not capable of being upgraded, they need to be fully reconstructed. They're not, the underlayment in them is not sufficient. We need to go back in, we need to tear them all up, we need to recompact them. And Commissioner Heenick in Montreal County said to me, he said, grade B compaction is not good enough. And I said, what do you mean, grade B compaction? He said, well, there's 3 grades of compaction, A, B, and C. And we've always thought grade B compaction was good enough, and it's not. We need to use grade A compaction if we really anticipate the life of these roads to be 20 years or more, when we expect the kind of weight, and volume to go across them. So I'm thinking about, what does this mean? What can we do differently? And so I've continued to have discussion with Upper Great Plains about what can you do to do even better, to give us even better information. And as it stands today, in an oil tax bill that I'm proposing, I have another appropriation for Upper Great Plains Transportation to even carry this on in the next biennium with an even larger appropriation and do even more scientific evaluation of our roads, because they can go out there and they can do what they call thumping tests that use resonance to tell them whether or not that substructure is of sufficient nature to support upgrading the road, or if it needs to be completely reconstructed. And they'll do it statewide, not just oil counties, statewide, so that we'll get a thorough analysis of all of our county roads, so we can have a better opinion or better scientific evidence to indicate what it is we need to do statewide. Because with the amount of money that the state has available, from my perspective, now is the time to fix our infrastructure. It's critical to our state long term, and we can do it and pay cash. Now, it's a lot of money. Their report tells us it's a lot of money. I don't remember the total. I think
a lot of money to do what? Do the upgrades they're recommending?
To do all of the roads in oil and non-oil producing counties is, I think, $7 billion.
Yes.
To do the standard that they believe is necessary.
To the standard they believe is necessary.
And what will you spend in the time frame they're suggesting $7 billion need to be spent?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but
this is like $7 billion over 20 years.
Over
too.
20 till between now and 2032, 20 years. Yeah.
So what's in the budget in that same time frame?
Well, the budget the next 2 years is almost $3 billion.
Yeah, but that's also state roads.
That's correct.
That's also state roads.
Yeah, we're talking the study deals strictly with county
and township
roads.
Yep.
Not state roads.
$7 billion just in county and township road needs are necessary in the next.
Yep.
That's over 20 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think when you consider it's over 20 years, it's kind of a less impressive figure, but it's still impressive.
It's $834 million in the next biennium, in this upcoming biennium.
Okay, and what is in this upcoming biennium? What do you venture will be spent on those county and township roads?
If we can get sufficient number of contractors to do the work, I think we'll spend that much. And my hope is, and I believe the hope of the legislature is, that it will be done right. Because if you take Highway 2 when it was 4-lane, it was anticipated to last 20 years. No one anticipated the traffic's going to have. DOT says right now if it has an 8-year life, we're lucky.
Left.
No, 8 years total.
Oh.
We're lucky. Mm-hmm. I mean, it needs to start the process of being, upgraded already. And the same thing applies in county roads. If we build them right, they should last us 20, 30 years or more. If we try to do them on the cheap, we're probably going to do them multiple times and end up costing more money. So,
when you mentioned the depth, that you wanted a study done in more depth, what are you taught when you what are you talking about when you talk about more depth? Are you talking about this?
The type of testing I was talking about, the residence testing. So they actually go out and they physically test every road, as opposed to asking the township what condition their road is in, and getting a plethora of opinions or variance or diversity of opinions as to the level of expertise. We're going to have them go out and actually physically measure every road, so we know the status. And then traffic counts will determine which roads get the highest priority as far as when they need to have work done on them. But there will be money out there, theoretically, to help them do it. And
as far as, was there any disagreement between, you mentioned essentially a disagreement between the report's conclusion and a gentleman you mentioned who said, well, that road needs to be reconstructed, it can't be just upgraded. Was there a disagreement, any pushback from the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute about that conclusion?
No, I don't think, no, absolutely not. They didn't disagree with it. The point was that they relied on the counties to provide them with the information telling them which roads were in what condition. They used that to decide what needed to be upgraded based on width and height, and didn't do the resonance testing.
Okay. And that's the difference here. They're actually going to be doing field work.
Going to go out
they're instead of relying upon the word of the county folks, they're going to go out and do their own work.
Yep.
How long is this going to take, do you think?
Well, it'll take the next plan, and they'll be asked to provide us with at least annual reports to the budget section on their progress, and by the start of the next legislative session.
We've been talking to Representative Bob Scarpole from Tioga. He's a Republican. He represents 3 counties in northwestern North Dakota. We also have as our guests Mr. Dan Brose, who is the president of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, and he's the Bowman City Engineer. We also have Mr. Brady Pelton, who hasn't said a word yet, but we will, I think, ask him something eventually. He is the Deputy Director of the Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. And, of course, this association is going to be playing a major role in the legislature because of oil production and road repairs and the importance of both.
We'll take a short break, come back and continue our discussion. Also be joined by the mayor of Watford City, Brent Sanford, in our next half hour. Stay tuned. We're live at the Peacock American Grill and Bar in downtown Bismarck. Burgers $1 off, appetizers $1 off tonight. We'll see you here. Stop by and join us if you're in Bismarck, Mandan. Thanks for listening to the Legislature Today radio show. We'll continue after this timeout on K-Fire, AM 1100 and AM 1090 in Tioga. And we are back at the Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar in downtown Bismarck. Burgers and appetizers flying out the door because they're $1 off tonight, so it's a great deal. And about 20 minutes or so to go on the program. Going to add one guest to the mix and continue on with our conversation with the folks from the Association for Oil and Gas Producing Counties, the sponsor for this hour of the program. Also want to thank a new sponsor to the program. Log homes have come a long way since Honest Abe's cabin of old. Today's log homes are as warm, dry, and energy efficient as they are beautiful, and nobody builds them better than Prairie Outpost Log Homes of Mandan. Everything from a simple hunting or ranch cabin to complex structures like the St. James Church being built in Cannonball with a reciprocating timber frame. They can help you create the inviting ambiance and beauty that only log or timber frame can deliver. You can see Prairie Outpost on Facebook or online at POLH.com. POLH.com. We welcome Prairie Outpost Log Homes of Mandan as one of our sponsors on the Legislature Today radio show. One more guest joining us by phone. The mayor of Watford City, Brent Sanford, is here. Otherwise, we continue with Dan Brose and Bob Scarpole. And our guest today, Association of Oil and Gas Counties, coming to you from the Peacock Alley, American Grill and Bar. Brady Pelton, too, the Deputy Executive Director of the Association of Oil and Gas Counties. And, of course, the host for the program, the Managing Editor of Great Plains News, Dale Wetzel. Dale, back at it.
Thank you, Scott. Mayor Sanford.
Can you hear us, Brent?
Mayor Sanford, are you there? All right.
Now we can. Now we can
hear him now. Yes. I sound like a Verizon. Verizon is not one of our sponsors. Sorry. Mayor Sanford, can you explain to our listeners, please, what is it like living in Watford City now compared to what it was like 8 years ago?
8 years ago, I moved back to what people teased me when I was from where I was from in Denver, that I was moving back to semi-retirement. I tell you, it was. It sounds silly, but words like Mayberry is more like it was. I tell you what, the speed was what I'd remembered as a child. I mean, it was everybody knew each other. which I'll get to in a second. But when you know each other and you know everyone in town, it makes a huge difference on how you behave, and we can see the difference today. In 2010, we started to see escalation with the drilling move in this direction, where we started to see what the people in Stanley and Montreal County had been seeing for a few years, and right now we're at the eye of the hurricane. It's unbelievable to see the clamor of people needing jobs and not enough services for them, not enough housing for them. Our county is still sitting with nearly the same number of permanent apartments and houses that we had before this inundation of workers, and now there's estimates of anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 people living in campers and in mobile units, and really no way of counting them. The county's working towards getting zoned, and then they'll have to go in and start having a reason to count all the folks in the man camps around the county, but the number is tough to put a peg on. But just for example, our Come and Go store, the convenience store in town, just had a huge facelift, and there's literally 40 cars there at all times, filling. There's people waiting in line to get gas. There's people waiting in line to go in and get groceries, and I don't know where all the folks went before that opened up. It's amazing that the lines in the grocery stores are more than what I saw living in metro areas and in Denver and Phoenix. It's quite different than what we had before. We were spoiled. We could pull right up to the grocery store and walk right in and go get what you want and come to the front, talk to a clerk you've known your whole life, and there's two people in line, and you're out of there in 10 to 20 minutes. So it's changed. The traffic is like, I'm sitting right now on my office in Main Street looking east of town, and there's a string of lights coming into town as far as you can see, 2-3 miles out. And if you drive through the Badlands at any given night, even Sunday night, it's all you see is a string of lights back and forth out of Watford City. And you literally used to drive to the Grassy Butte, turn towards Killdeer and south towards Belfield or to Williston, and maybe see 2 or 3 cars. And it won't be the same ever again. And I can also tell you, we were seeing our community slowly die when it was at that point. And so this is good. It's just a matter of handling the impact and trying to get these people into permanent housing. And it really comes down to that. And so that's where our main focus is.
One of the things, Mayor, that we were talking about earlier was a road study that was done by the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, actually the most recent one, that is trying to identify which roads need to be improved dramatically, which ones need to be improved maybe less dramatically, which ones are carrying the traffic, that sort of thing. How useful is this going to be for how much easier is this going to make life in the region where you live if this is used to identify roads that need to be repaired and improved, and therefore the folks who live there will have better roads to drive on, even if there's quite a bit more traffic on them?
Is this similar to last session where it was for the county roads and township roads?
Yes, it is. Essentially it's a more in-depth version of the same study.
From what I understand from my friends on the county commission and the folks I serve on other boards with that are county commissioners, it really made a smooth activity of spreading out the grant dollars that were available by utilizing that report, and compare that to the scramble for the grant funds on the city side of the Energy Impact Office program, and it's night and day. And so I hope that it is similar to that, where it's kind of a calming effect, and it's used as a way to allocate out the available funds based on priority. It seemed like it worked very well last session.
Mayor, could you describe the shape of the local road network in your neck of the woods?
We sit in the middle of the patch. If you have a scatter diagram of where all the wells are being drilled, we're sitting in the center of it, kind of on the southern end of the center, and it would be somewhere between Tioga and us. And you really see it with the fact that as you go south of Watford City on Highway 85 and you reach the Highway 200 corner that turns towards Killdeer or else south to Belfield, it starts to taper off a little bit, but not a lot. But in between that radius, especially from if you head east of Watford City into the oil fields on Highway 23 or head towards Williston on 85, it's bumper to bumper most of the time, and these roads are Highway 85 has been improved and improved and improved, and it's the passing lanes and the widening of the shoulders between Watford City and Williston have made that a lot safer road. Gives us hope for Highway 23 and Highway 85 south of town as well. And but Highway 23 heads from Watford City through Newtown, across the lake, and ends up south of Minot, or else you can shoot north on Highway 8 towards Stanley up into the oil field that way. And Highway 23 it gets the self-named moniker, the Death Highway, around here. I mean, it's a farm-to-market road. It's got very narrow shoulders. It's got very steep ditches, and there's nowhere to go if someone's passing on a hill in your bumper to bumper with trucks before and after. It's really scary. A lot of people that have the Keene area has traditionally been part of the Watford City market area, and they're 25 miles away. Those people are choosing not to work this direction anymore. It's just too dangerous to drive that route every day.
What can be done about that, sir?
That one is on the DOT has been responsive compared to what a Department of Transportation can normally do because of the hundreds of millions of dollars that are needed to do this type of road work. Compared to what it normally would be, they've been responsive. The response to Highway 85 has been phenomenal to keep repairing and working on that and widening that. They came in and filled in the tracks that the trucks leave through the brand new asphalt. I mean, within 2 years, these roads are wavy again, where you look down the road and you see waves. Those little gullies that the tires push down the asphalt into make little ice streaks. I mean, the DOT comes in and has worked on those, but 23 is on their plan for. I'm not sure if it's 2013 or 14, but it's going to be a massive project. And then trying to route that incredible amount of traffic around. I believe the number is somewhere around 10,000 vehicles coming in from that route every day through Watford City. And so to reroute that traffic, there's just not a lot of options. And I tell people from larger areas that you just have to visualize this place as there's not enough roads is the problem. It's just there was not a need for a grid of roads like you have even in the eastern part of the state. It's wide open spaces. There were 6,000 people in our county, which is twice the size of Rhode Island, before this impact happened. There just were not a lot of need for a wide grid of roads. And now, with the traffic being so many times more, the roads just aren't. We don't have enough roads. I drove down to Denver to my brother's for Thanksgiving, and there's unbelievable traffic once you get out of here into Colorado. But the roads are wider. They've got more options. They've got more lanes. They've got other routes you can take.
And they're not all semi-trailers either, are they?
No, and the other thing is when you come up here, it's a majority are semi-trucks, and especially on that stretch from Belfield to Grassy Butte, it seems like that's all you see. And up here you see a lot of service pickups as well. I mean, you've got white service pickups and semi-trucks and scoria trucks, and I mean, I really don't know how the farmers move their equipment. Some of them have told me they move it in the middle of the night, trying to find windows of time where they can do that. And but it's just when a person comes in from out of the area, they remark how it looks like everybody drives pickups and nobody drives cars, and also that all you see are semi trucks on the road.
It'd be interesting to see a Prius trundling down the road in that sort of atmosphere, wouldn't it?
Which of these does not belong to the other? What's interesting about this is that what we heard from Mayor Sanford is very much what what Bob Scarpel's just described, and you have two smaller communities. I guess they aren't small anymore, but smaller communities in Tioga and Watford City in the middle of the oil boom. I'm curious from both of you, Bob, you first, and then the mayor. If you had to turn that clock back, going to Dale's question 8 years ago, and how things are different, would you ever do it?
No, I wouldn't do it. Because of the fact that we are able to see population increasing, see young people back in our schools, seeing school numbers increase. I wouldn't roll it back. The one point I'd like to make that hasn't been made is that the cost of doing things, how it's changed. When we four-laned Highway 2 from Minot to Williston, there was nearly 100 miles involved. It cost $140 million. Today, to four-lane the road from Williston to Watford City, 45 miles. It costs us $300 million. So it's going to cost more than twice as much to pave less than half as much.
Is that a demand issue, that there's just so much demand for those kind of crews and trucks?
Well,
that
it's just the cost, the escalation of the costs associated with paving roads.
Well, we're also talking about, what, $90 a barrel oil versus, what, 20 or 30?
Well,
I don't know if it was that cheap, but it was
probably that cheap. But I mean, there have been significant cost escalations that we're needing to deal with.
And there's that in the. Go ahead, Mayor.
23, and that's 80 miles, so that's going to be, there again, that's going to be double the cost of. That would be an atrocious number, but I'm sure it would be relative. You're talking $500 million. I mean, these numbers are astronomical. It's frightening how this adds up.
It also costs you more to buy a hammer, doesn't it? Because the hardware store owner's got to pay the guy that works the counter and stocks the shelves more as well, right?
And the more four-laning we endeavor to do, the more issues we're going to run into. Like with the bypass at Williston, we're going to have environmental issues. I mean, it's just, the complications seem to be geometric in the cost escalation anymore.
Mayor Sanford, the other part of that question, would
I turn the clock back?
Yeah, answer that for me.
This is my answer that I repeat probably weekly. When we lived in Denver in the year 2000, I would religiously read our local newspaper, and one of the headlines was a complete dismay for me in 2001, where I saw that the kindergarten class for the year 2005 was projected to be 5 children based on the number of children born in McKenzie County. That's the year my daughter was born down in Denver. Today, with this oil impact, there are 75 to 85 kids in her class at any given time, but depending on if the kids are moving in and out on pipeline jobs or not. But 5 kids is no way to continue a community, to have 5 people in one generation. 75 to 80, we have hope. We just have to handle this impact the right way. We have to make sure we have the infrastructure and the housing for the permanent jobs that stay here for the next 50 years, just like they did for the Amarada Hess jobs and the Texaco jobs from the 50s through the 80s and up till now.
Mayor, when do you think that you'll have your arms around this thing? Do you think about that?
We've got a really good city planner here that's a native of the area that worked in the firestorm of West Las Vegas developing, saw this kind of population growth. So we always feel, between them and AE2S, our engineering firm, we feel like we have a handle on it. It's just where you find the money. We feel like we've got a really good plan for 5 miles, a 5-mile square area around Watford City if the demand was there. If the need for people to work these jobs is that high, we've got that much area that we could develop, and we have a plan to do it. It's just the scary part of this is, where in the world does that money come from? When you're a tiny little town our population in 2010 was 1,744 people. We don't even have the financial wherewithal to bond for all the infrastructure needed. And so that's where the fear comes in. We feel like we do have a handle on the water, the septic, the lagoons, the plans for roads. It's just, again, where does that money come from to get this done?
How can the legislature help you in these matters, sir?
This go around, I can tell that the question from the legislature is, but how much skin do you have in the game? Because they're going around and all they see is people with their hands out and saying, we need more, we need more. And I would just encourage the legislature to look at the reality of that, of who is putting skin in the game. Is it a good place to invest with them? Let's invest with them. Let's take some of this money that's coming in. Let's consider the legacy fund, the 30% savings account we're setting up for ourselves is the money for the non-impacted areas. Let's look at what do we do with the money that's coming in today. For instance, with that 10.8% effective tax rate that Rauschenberger from the tax office put forth, that calculates out to somewhere around close to $1 billion of oil and gas extraction tax that will come out of this county in the next biennium. Out of this county alone, $1 billion. With what we're looking at getting under current legislation for county road projects, for city infrastructure projects, and an increase in the formula, that number's coming in maybe around $110 million, and we're going to generate $1 billion. Well, guess what? We need more than $110 billion. Watford City has an infrastructure plan that shows we need $190 million to build out this 3 to 4 5 mile grid around the area for the developments that are known, for the developers here that have bought land. And we're looking at, if the fund stays the same for the city infrastructure, we're looking at $20 million. If that's what we got last time, we'd be looking at another $20 million at the most, maybe 16, and we need 192. Last session we needed 20, and we received 16. This time we need 192 million. The impacts are 10 times more.
I want to ask both Bob and...
the only ones in that boat. You've got other little towns in the center of this. The population needs to be able to sit in the center of this too, and not just be 100 miles out at the corners on Dickinson, Williston, Minot, and Bismarck. And
I wanted to ask you about a project, Mayor, that was before the City Council of Stanley here last week, and Bob, you as well, because of those needs you're talking about and the limited bonding authority. There's been this proposal thrown out for what's called, I guess, a P3 project, where there would be private, in the case of Stanley, they want to do a city hall. So they would take private financing and risk from investors, and it would fund public projects, but it wouldn't take the bonding authority of the city of Stanley. They're taking a look, and they set up a committee to study that for the new city hall. Given what you both are talking about in the way of needs, is that a good idea? Bob, we'll start with you quickly.
Well, anything that can be done creatively is a good thing. It does come down to whether or not the proposal can be sustained long term for the city of Stanley, and I don't know the particulars of it well enough to be able to answer that question. But and again, I'm not familiar with the federal program. But if the city of Stanley thinks they can sustain the funding for that long term, if that's the way they want to go for it.
Bob, what do you think about what the mayor just said in terms of the share of money that McKenzie County is putting into the state coffers versus what they're getting back from it, and what sort of argument can be made at the legislature that the balance should be a little more even?
Well, that's part of the reason that I've been working on a new distribution formula, or a change in the distribution formula. The oil counties, or not the oil counties, the coal counties in this state get in excess of 35% of the revenue they produce back to the political subdivisions. The oil counties are under 10. Now, we're talking about a significantly different amount of money. The coal counties don't put near as much in the kitty as oil and gas. However, the needs are very dramatic in oil country as compared to what we're funding. That percentage needs to be dramatically higher, and I think in this legislative session we'll raise it. But we need to continue, and I think the legislature wants you to be patient, because we need to be reassured that the money is being spent appropriately, not just for higher cost programs.
Okay. Do you have that assurance presently, do you think?
I think it's been demonstrated to us that we need to give them more opportunities to continue to prove to us that they can handle more money appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Mayor, what do you say to that? If you had your druthers, sir, what would the formula be? What do you think is a fair return on what McKenzie County puts into the state treasury? About
20 seconds for your answer, Mayor. We're getting short on time here. Go ahead.
The Vision West project came up with, ironically, the same number as Bob says on the 35% for coal country. They're saying 30 to 35 is what neighboring states do. I have to thank Bob for his bill that is looking at increasing the distribution formula. That will help a great amount. But we need to look at these one-time grant programs too. The city $100 million fund and the county road $142 million, and consider upping those. Senate Bill 2310.
Thank you for your time, Mayor. We had the mayor of Wofford City, North Dakota, Mr. Brent Sanford. We also have been speaking to Representative Bob Scarpel from Tioga, a Republican, and Mr. Dan Brose, the president of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, who is the city engineer in Bowman. And last but not least, and he said absolutely nothing the whole show, but he's been here, Mr. Brady Pelton, the Deputy Director of the Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties.
Thankfully, our guests from the Association of Oil and Gas Counties are here every week, because we got a lot of ground to cover.
Absolutely.
And we're out of time. Thanks for listening to the Legislature Today radio show. Back tomorrow night, folks.